All right, guys, so we are going to get started. So first and foremost, happy Penguin Day. We're very excited to be able to do some of our normal Penguin Day activities with you guys online today. For anybody who did not hear my initial spiel, you will not be able to interact with us directly by audio or visually today. You guys do have the option of chatting with us. So if you don't already see your chat box, if you hover your mouse over your screen at the bottom, you should see a little icon that says chat. If you click on that, it'll bring up the chat box and you'll be able to type questions to us throughout the presentation today. So feel free to utilize that. We'd love to get to your questions. We'll probably get to them at the end, maybe a couple throughout. So stick around to have your questions answered. So let's get into it. My name is Annie Wheeler. I'm the lead zoo naturalist for programs at the zoo. And today we have the amazing Kevin Blakely with us. Kevin, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, guys. Yeah, so I'm the primary penguin keeper at the SANCCOB Zoo.
Awesome. So we are going to see a slideshow about Kevin's work with SANCCOB, which is one of our conservation partners. And you should be able to see that slideshow started right now. And I'm going to hand it over to Kevin because he can explain everything much better than I can. So Kevin, go ahead and get started.
All right. Thanks, Annie. So welcome everybody to our virtual Penguin Day. This is going to be a little interesting. Never done it this way, but I basically put a slideshow together. In December 2019, I got this incredible opportunity to go over to South Africa, work with the zoo's longtime conservation partner, SANCCOB. So I wanted to start out. I realize there's probably going to be people on here that have no idea, what a SANCCOB is. So I'm going to just explain a little bit. It stands for the Southern African Foundation for the Conservation of Coastal Birds. It is an international leader in coastal bird rehabilitation. They provide 24/7 rescue services. They do seabird rehabilitation, chick rearing, oiled wildlife, and preparation. Preparation is huge to be ready for when an oil spill happens. They do a lot of education about penguins and about the issues that penguins have. They're doing research not only on penguins themselves, but on the food source for them. And they provide rangers in the field to observe and maintain colonies. So it's really an awesome organization. I just took this graphic off of their website. Just gives you some ideas of some of the numbers that they've dealt with. Since 1968, almost 100,000 birds they've had admitted in, and you can see they take care of species well beyond the African penguin. They now have this chick bolstering program, and that's their average number for each year. I forgot to tell you guys at the beginning too, in case you hear squawking in the background. KK the cockatoo lives with me, and my next door neighbor is mowing the lawn right now, so he likes to be heard. So that's what you hear in the background. No need to call 911. Everything's fine. So while I was at SANCCOB, I was very happy to see this sign that was up. This is an organization I love and support, and it was very impressive to me to see that the Seneca Park Zoo was on the top tier of contributors. And that makes me very proud while I was there. So let's just real quick, I just wanted to talk a little bit about how SANCCOB even started, because I think it's kind of an interesting story. So this is Althea Westphal. In the late 1960s, Althea discovered oil penguins washing up on the beach to her local SPCA, and she found out really quick that they were not capable of handling such a thing. So she literally began washing penguins in her bathtub. She was using dish soap, and she was feeding them strips of cod. There was an oil spill about that time, a fairly major oil spill, and she took in 60 birds into her yard to clean them. And that's really where everything started. So in 1968, SANCCOB was officially formed, and she's been working SANCCOB's really been working hard ever since and continues to grow, thanks to everyone's support. Um, so let's talk a little bit about the African penguin. People, when they see penguins, you often see penguins standing on snow and ice. I'm sure there's a number of people that don't even realize there are penguins in Africa. Um, so I wanted to talk about the African penguin a little bit. This just shows their range on South Africa. You'll see that they have a range that goes all the way up to southern Angola and wraps all the way around to Mozambique and the east. It's quite a large range. The orange, as you see, is actually their feeding range. So that's the whole southern tip of Africa. Now you'll notice the red dots, they actually have 28 different breeding colonies. Most of those are out on islands. There are 4 mainland colonies where you can actually see them. The island colonies, you actually can't get there. So why is SANCCOB so necessary anyways? Why are we even having this conversation? Why did I need to go over there? Unfortunately, this is the reason. In 2010, the African penguin was placed on the endangered species list due to their rapid decline. And so when I say rapid decline, here I'm going to throw some numbers at you. There's kind of a lot on here, but if you look at the numbers as they go down, you'll see it's pretty shocking. It's pretty dramatic. At the turn of the 20th century, it was estimated there could be as many as 4 million African penguins. You see down on the bottom now, as of 2019, it's estimated that there are less than 40,000. Now, this is kind of a consistent 2% drop, but if you notice the numbers between 1930 and 1956, there's a huge drop there. And so you might wonder what happened there. There was a time for about 30 years where penguin eggs were taken as a delicacy. And so that went right up until the late 1950s. And unfortunately, that had a devastating effect on the populations there. When I talk about taking eggs, they estimated a 30-year period, there were about 13 million eggs harvested. So you think about it, that's 13 million penguins that didn't hatch. And really, right up until 1956, even in 1956, there was 127,000 penguin eggs taken. So thankfully, that practice has been banned, but obviously was devastated and took a lot of time to come back from. But as you go on, you see they consistently fall. And so, the question begs, what's happening to these birds? The African penguin has, unfortunately, a lot of things to deal with. I talked about the egg collection. Also, their guano was collected. The guano poop, you figure over thousands of years on these islands, the guano actually built up to be pretty deep. I mean, they're talking about in areas on the cap, 23 meters. It's about 70 feet. So it's estimated that they cleared off these islands of the guano. They found that it made really good fertilizer, about 200,000 tons of guano. Now you might wonder, so that's penguin poop. It's kind of disgusting. Why does it matter? The thing is, when it dries out, it has a consistency of like crumbly peat moss. It made really good nesting areas for them. They could burrow into it. It created not only a place to protect them, their chicks, their eggs, but also it insulated them from the heat of South Africa. Once these islands were all cleared off, it unfortunately changed the way they had to nest from then on. So that was obviously devastating. Overfishing is one of the biggest issues they're dealing with right now in South Africa due to climate changes and also the fact that we are just really good, much better fishermen than the birds are. Their numbers of fish are dwindling. So it's a huge issue right now. oil pollution. It's a major shipping lane around the coast of South Africa. Unfortunately, a lot of oil ends up in the water. I'm going to talk about that in a minute. And then climate change is changing the temperatures of the water. It's changing where the fish are going. Unfortunately, the penguins queue into conditions that are right for, where the fish used to be, and they're going to these fishing areas, and the fish aren't there anymore, and it's causing real problems with them having to feed themselves and feeding the ship their chicks, and then obviously natural predators they have to deal with all along. So I talked about oil spills. That's probably one of the the people that do know about SANCCOB. It's mainly because of one enormous event. In 2000, a ship called the Treasure ran aground off Cape Town, and it caused an oil slick basically right in the heart of the penguin territory. At that time, it was estimated that it oiled about 20,000 penguins. So SANCCOB brought these into a warehouse. It was a major undertaking. Um, Penguin professionals from around the world basically descended on South Africa. Uh, and so it's, to this day, it's still the largest animal rescue in history. Uh, they not only cleaned 20,000 penguins throughout this process, they also discovered that the oil slick was heading towards penguin colonies that had not yet been affected. They really did not have the resources to clean another 20,000 penguins. So they actually collected another 20,000 penguins, trucked them across southern tip of Africa, released them about 800 miles away. The hopes that by the time they swam back to their area, the oil would be gone, and that actually worked out. It was amazing. So during the whole process, they saved about 40,000 African penguins in this one oil spill. It's a really interesting story. I don't have time really to go into it in detail that it deserves. If anybody's interested in more information, there's a great book by a friend of mine, Diane DiNapoli, The Great Penguin Rescue. You can get this at hardcover, or it's actually available as an audiobook. She also did a TED Talk about 8 years ago about the subject, so you might want to check that out if you're interested in more information. So on to my trip. So this was by far the longest trip I've ever taken. For anyone who's never traveled to Africa, which I'm guessing is probably quite a few people, this is what it looks like. It was a 3-leg trip for me. There's a number of ways you can get to Cape Town. This is the way my trip went. Rochester to JFK. I flew into Johannesburg, and then after a layover off to Cape Town. Now you might be wondering, how long exactly does this trip take to get from Rochester to Cape Town? It was over 24 hours. It's quite like I said, definitely the longest trip I've ever taken. It's about 17 hours on that leg from JFK to Johannesburg. So one thing that was really, really interesting for me about this trip, besides just being able to work with the penguins, was what I learned about South Africa. So many misconceptions that I had, so many things that were amazing to me. This is this was between Johannesburg and Cape Town. I just never realized how mountainous South Africa was. So this was out my window. I was really happy to have a window seat on this particular leg, because it's just it's a really beautiful area. Now you might be thinking, I'm flying into South Africa. We're going to be landing on a dirt runway and this little shack of an airport. That could not be any more wrong. It's an absolute beautiful airport, brand new, modern. It's really great to see. It's a little more in the airport. You'll notice on the left, they there's a lot of these, a lot of different things you'll find around talking about water, encouraging people to think about water, to save water. It's in South Africa, water is a valuable commodity. Even in my room, there was a little sign in the shower that said, "Please limit your shower to 3 minutes." Which I don't know if you've ever timed a shower, but 3 minutes was pretty quick for me, especially after you work with penguins all day. A 3 minute shower is it's a quickie. Um, so I did actually have a driver meet me at the airport, and I stayed at Elements Lodge, which was about a 10-minute walk from SANCCOB. This is my room. My room was on the right there behind the white truck, which was nice. Had my own entrance, and went out to the backyard. I hate to say it, but I didn't actually use the pool the whole time I was there. Um, the days at SANCCOB, some of them ran into 10 hours. And one thing I learned about this area in South Africa and Tableview, everything closes up pretty early. So if you're getting out of work at 6 o'clock, you need to be running around to get groceries done and your laundry. So I just never actually got to use the pool, but it's my room. It's not real fancy, but it really did the trick for me. It ended up being about $32 a night, so worked out for my budget pretty well. And one interesting little accessory that came with my room, it actually came with a cat. So this is Fluffy. Fluffy owns the room. I just got to stay in it. You see here, Fluffy decided the laptop was a warm place to sit. She learned real quick where the food came from. One night I went down, you look at the picture on the lower left there. I went downtown Cape Town and was out kind of late, got home about 11 o'clock. Fluffy's sitting there at the door waiting for me. So South Africa, you might be thinking, what are the neighborhoods? I know when I started planning for this trip, I had no idea what to expect and what the area looked like. I can tell you it's actually very, very nice neighborhoods you're walking through. So this was part of the walk from Elements Lodge to SANCCOB. One interesting thing I noticed, and I never really talked to anybody about it, so I don't exactly know why, but almost all of the houses are walled in like this. They have their yards walled in. There's very few houses where you can just walk right up to the front yard. I don't know if that's a throwback to past, maybe a security issue, but it's something you see throughout this area. Also, you see a lot of signs for that say borehole. I had to ask what that was, why people had signs in their yard that said borehole. I talked about how water was very critical in this area. Borehole is, we would call it a well, and they just want people to know when they're watering their lawns, they're using well water and not the municipal water. So SANCCOB now has two facilities. Their primary facility is north of Cape Town. It's Tableview. They also have one in Port Elizabeth. This is the entrance here to SANCCOB. As you can see in the background, that's actually Table Mountain. And in front of Table Mountain is downtown Cape Town. So very nice view here. You pretty much no matter where you go in this area, you can always see Table Mountain. People use it as a guide to figure out where they are. Just look for the mountain. This is the entrance. You can see they've upgraded. For anybody who's been to SANCCOB, seen SANCCOB in the past, lots of upgrades. Got a really nice new generator for power outages. This is the back of the facility. If you look at the buildings on the left, the ones that have the peaks, that's the original buildings that SANCCOB used. They had a very small area when they first started. The buildings from the right on are all brand new. This is part of their new facility as of, I believe, 2010. A while back, they had you could actually buy a brick to help build this. So this is all their new area. So we'll take a little tour of the new areas. I threw this graphic on here. This is just a rendering that SANCCOB provided. It kind of gives you an overview of the area that from an angle that I couldn't actually get take a picture of it. So But you know, the pens, the pools are on the left. There's an area in the center, grassy area where they use for a lot of different events. The pool on the right is a home pen. This is where birds that are deemed unreleasable stay there, basically live their life out at SANCCOB, and they use it as an exhibit, so that they can, when they're giving tours, they can talk about some of the different birds that are in there. Office is in the back, the new building on the left where the hospital and ICU and everything is located. So this is this is the grassy area. And one thing you'll notice is that the entire facility is enclosed in mesh, not a single bird in there. Penguins are susceptible to mosquito-borne illnesses such as malaria and West Nile. So the entire facility is netted in. You see the grassy area. Those are some interns in the center there working on their, filling out their med cards. And then on the left, we have some staff and interns discussing the ICU unit that's up there. So this area is used for a number of different things. They do give tours, explain to people what's going on. And then they have some activities for kids. They can look through microscopes, see their feathers and things. And then again, on the left here, we have interns working on their paperwork. This is the home pen I talked about. These are penguins that were deemed unreleasable. Actually, a number of birds are in here. There's mixed birds in here that are deemed unreleasable, so they're going to live their life out here. Unfortunately, this area is pretty well at capacity, and so it's very important that they get every penguin they can rehabilitated and released back to the wild. You'll notice the penguin in the very closest foreground doesn't even have a right wing. These are birds that have issues that would keep them from being released out. So as I said, there's a number of different birds in here. This is actually a rockhopper penguin here. So and you'll actually see them around. So if this is if you've ever watched any videos from SANCCOB, you've probably seen Rocky. This is their mascot. Rocky's a rockhopper penguin. He kind of has run of the place. So you may run into Rocky just wandering around and making sure everything's working as it should. These are some of the pens where the penguins are rehabilitated. This is all part of their new area. You can see here, basically the layout is there are two swimming pools, the one on the left and there's one on the right you can't quite see. Around each pool is 12 different pens, and they all have access. Actually, there's 6 around each pool. They each have access to the pool, so that gives them 12 pens. Right in the front, in the foreground here, you see the white tub. That's actually an area for nebulizing the birds that have breathing issues. The nebulizer allows them to inhale antibiotics. So you can see some of the birds in the center there. This is one of the pools. Now, while I was there, most of the time I spent was in pen 5, which you see on the left, and I can see pen 5 is empty. So these are actually the birds that I worked with getting a swim. The pen that I was in, I have a graphic that shows it in a little bit, but these birds were closest to being released. They referred to these as 1-hour swimmers. I had to make sure they swam 3 times a day and they had to stay in the water for at least an hour. This is just to build up their strength because they're getting very close to being released, and they need to be able to have their strength up to spend their time in the ocean. So just another view of that area. So you can see all the different pens, the way they access them. These are some of the new pools that they built. They had to put these tarps up because they found that the penguins could actually climb the grating to the filtration system. So This is the aviary, which is down on the far end. You'll see this is completely netted in. These are flighted birds that are being rehabilitated. There's a number of birds in here. Right in the foreground is a Cape gull. Basically the same. It's a seagull that we know from around here, but Cape gulls are a little bit bigger. There's ducks in there, and then the black birds on the left are the Cape cormorants, found exclusively in South Africa. They had a number of them being rehabilitated at the time that I was there. So I talked about that they've got the new facilities. Here's one of the older buildings that they used to work in. It was converted to a chick rearing unit. This is one of the newer programs they have, the chick bolstering. And I'll get into exactly why that is. Now, I couldn't get in this room. There's very limited access, and I'm happy to say there were not a lot of chicks there when I was there. It wasn't that season, but they're not only hatching eggs here and raising them, but they're bringing chicks in that have been abandoned, and they raise them up and they move down through the process. Here's kind of a quick flow chart. I know it's going to be hard to follow, but this just kind of shows the different steps that is required if they bring an egg in, how it gets to the point of release in a chick. You see the bottom yellow box, which says blue. That was actually pen 5. So that was where I was working, and I had a pool pen. So you can see the birds that I had were very close to being released. We would swim them. They would go through a release evaluation, check their feather condition, make sure they were waterproof. They obviously have to be waterproof to be released. And then if they, once they're deemed releasable, then they would move on, or they would go back up, and we would keep, working on. So this is kind of just a tour of the new facilities that they have. If you see, you can kind of see the buildings on the right there through the mesh. That's where the old SANCCOB was. Everything to the left was brand new. They have a surgical theater, they call it. You can actually watch surgeries taking place. Top of the line facility now. Thankfully, no surgeries going on when I was there. Might have been interesting to see, but obviously I don't want to see any surgeries taking place. They have a brand new seabird administration and hospital area. This is where any birds that are coming in, be it admitted, would be brought in here. Their health is evaluated. It's determined what exactly needs to be done, where within the facility they're going to go from there. This looks very quiet and peaceful right now. During the time of a crisis, it can get very busy, very hectic quickly. So as we move down in the building, this is the food prep area. You can see here, this also gets very busy. This is a daily process. This is really the center of SANCCOB. Everybody comes together at food prep and then goes their own way to do whatever. You can see, well, I'm going to talk a minute about the lovely fish shake in the center there. But so when you first get to SANCCOB, your first day, you spend in food prep. Because it is the center, it's a good idea. It's a good place to see what's taking place. So I got to learn how to make the fish formula. It actually may look fairly delicious. You would not want to try this. This is actually ground up fish and scallops and shrimp, and with vitamins and minerals mixed in. And then it has to go through a strainer to get the larger chunks out, because what we're then going to do is put it in these syringes with these tubes. The tube is actually going to go down the throat and into the stomach, and you're going to inject the formula right into the bird's stomach. And I have a demonstration of that in a little bit. I did while I was there, I thought it might be interesting because the food prep area is so busy. I thought it might be interesting to do a little time lapse. So This is just like 20 seconds, amounts to about, well, I don't know, amounts to probably about an hour in food prep, but it just gives you an idea just how it's just a continuous, continuous source of activity. You can see everybody getting buckets ready, and then they're going to head out to their individual pens, depending on where they're working. I mentioned that oil spills are a huge problem for the African penguin. If they get oiled in the wild, there is no way for a penguin to clean itself. It is essentially a death sentence without human intervention. And so it's very important that they are ready for an oil spill. It's not something you throw together at the time. You need to be ready for action. They have this wonderful emergency wash bay that was built. I'm happy to say that while I was there, it never got used, but they do have now 12 individual washing bins, stations, so that there's no more washing them on top of barrels or however it is they came up with at the beginning. So I threw this in here. You might you might say, why is it interesting, the laundry? Um, this, if you're assigned to laundry, it's a continuous job for the entire day. They literally go through hundreds of towels a day at SANCCOB. If you, later on, you'll see a little bit of video of us working down in the pens, and you'll see within the picture dozens of towels just in the one picture. So they also have now a really great ICU unit. While I was there, there's actually quite a few birds in the ICU. As a matter of fact, they've actually now taken over the hallway outside of ICU. So all these pens in the front here all have penguins at different stages of treatment, and they're kept out in the hallway. So your day starts with a meeting. This is our morning meeting. We all meet at the board. Someone from the staff will go over everyone's assignment. Every pen will have a supervisor. And then depending on how many birds are in there, they'll have a number of assistants. There's an area on the board with any special projects your pen, they might want you to try and get done during the day. This is what the board looks like. Like I said, pens on the left, all the different areas within SANCCOB, and then who's going to be supervising that area, and then who will be assisting the supervisor and special tasks and additional things going on. During the meeting, they'll go over if there are any issues with any of the birds, any particular bird that needs to be watched, anything that was reported the day before. This is all at the time we get their information in the morning. I talked about I had to swim my penguins. They had to swim for an hour. And then after they're done with the swim, they go through a pre-release check where they're evaluated, and it's just determined how close to being released they are. So their feathers are checked after they swim to make sure that they're dry underneath, to make sure they're completely waterproof. And then they do blood work. So this picture down in the front here is just some blood work. As you can see, they bring everything to the pen, and it's done right there. And then we would move on to feeding. This is every pen would have a sheet that looks like this. It's a little complicated when you're first there. You look at this, and it's kind of mind-boggling, but it's actually each bird has their number, which is on a band on their wing. So that's the number on the left. Their age. In my pen, I only had adults and blues. The blue is basically just it's a bird that is beyond the chick stage, but cannot manage, cannot feed itself, cannot swim in the ocean, is not considered adolescent yet. So the blue is just an age determination at a certain stage. The green is how many fish that particular bird is going to get fed. Most of them are getting 3 in the morning, 3 in the afternoon. Some of the adults you'll see down on the bottom, based on their weight, are getting 4. any meds the birds are going to get. You'll notice a lot of them have the BFRX, both feet. That stands for Bumblefoot RX, both feet. BID is twice a day. So Bumblefoot is something that they see a lot of. Actually, I think I talked about Bumblefoot a little bit later, but I talked about the nebulizer, that white bin. So I had 5 birds that needed to go in the nebulizer. BID is twice a day. They had to spend about 10 minutes in there twice a day. And then the D is actually electrolytes. So those particular birds are deemed to be dehydrated. They're actually getting electrolytes in the syringes injected right into their stomach. And then the 2 columns, the 10 and the 4 o'clock, means that they're getting formula in those syringes that I talked about. So this is pen 5. This is where I was assigned most of the time. So you'll notice in this pen, I can see 1 adult. Most of the birds I had were the blues. Actually, there's 2 adults there. Most of the birds I had were blues. And like I said, this was just a designation of their age. They were most likely removed from the nest because they weren't being cared for. And they were not able to go out into the ocean at that point in their life to hunt for fish. So they were collected by rangers, brought into SANCCOB, grown up to the point where they could be released and live on their own. We talked about earlier some of the issues that are facing the African penguin. One that I didn't bring up is something that's kind of a little more recent in the last few years, is they're finding a problem of what they're referring to as the chick-molt overlap. They have a very distinct breeding and molting seasons, and due to heat waves and severe weather, the breeding is being delayed, and sometimes even forcing them to have a second clutch of chicks, second clutch of eggs. Unfortunately, this is forcing the chick season into what is their molting season. These guys go through what's referred to as a catastrophic molt. They lose all their feathers at once. While they don't have their feathers, they cannot go out into the ocean to eat. And so when the chick season goes into the molting season, the parents can't go out into the ocean to fill themselves up to come back and feed the chicks. And the chicks are literally starving to death because the parents can't feed them. And so this is why the rangers are very important out in the colonies. They watch for this. If chicks are abandoned, they will actually bring them into SANCCOB. And so while I was there, a lot of the birds in there were actually these blues that were abandoned, and not so much injured adults. And a lot of that just has to do with the time of year I was there. I was actually there in the summer. So you're going to see a number of different injuries there. This one on the left lost a foot. It's actually an injury that's seen quite often. Usually this is going to be from a seal attack. One of their predators is a Cape fur seal. There's also great white sharks, although they generally don't survive a shark attack. This one on the right here, you see a lot of them with the bandaged foot. This is the bumblefoot that I talked about. Bumblefoot is really basically just well, I don't know how to describe it without being disgusting, but it's a pus-filled abscess. It's covered by a scab. It's really caused by the introduction of a Staphylococcus bacteria. And so later on, when I go through a feeding process, you'll see we actually put an antibiotic salve on the bottom of their feet to help with this. Anybody who's raised chickens knows about bumblefoot. It's an issue in a lot of birds that are standing around a lot. So there's just a little video. I told you that my birds were taken 1 hour swimming.
Come on, in the water. We got traffic jam here.
definite sound of chicks begging for food. It's nonstop while you're there. There's also just a little video of them swimming. Oh, I missed the video. And then this is just post swim. They do a lot of swim. And like I said, these are all basically what they're calling blue. One adult. After they swim, one of my jobs was to clean the pool. As you can see here, there's no shortage of supervisors while you're cleaning. Pool has to be cleaned often. It's like I said, I was there in summer, and the pools are not chlorinated, so it's important to keep the algae down. One of the main things you're going to be doing throughout the day is this feeding process. It's a bit more complicated than you might think. I kind of referred to it as their little pit stop, because you're going to bring them in, and there's a number of things you have to go through. So I have a little video here that I did. Actually, this is probably my longest video, probably about 1.5 minutes. It runs through the whole process of one bird. Now, the pen that I was working in, we had between 38 and 44 birds. So you can see there's 2 of us working during the feed. In the back is Wayne. He was actually supervisor that day. I was assisting him. So we figured each one of us have about 20 birds to go through. So you're gonna contain the bird, check the sheet, see what they're getting food-wise, medication-wise. So the tube is fed down the esophagus into the stomach, and then you inject formula into the stomach. Formula is actually in warm water, so there's no shock of a cold formula going down there. They're going to get fish. These are filtered, a little bigger than we feed at the zoo, but as you can see, they handle it quite well. So, these birds, when they were picked up out of the nest, have never been in the ocean. They have never eaten whole fish. They were being fed by the parents at that point. So they literally had to be trained to eat whole fish. We clean the beak off, just to make sure there's no fish guts in the nostrils, make sure they're breathing fine. So I'm just checking the sheet to make sure this one didn't need the bumblefoot on the bottom. We apply insect repellent to the top of the head. Just keeps insects away from your eyes. And then I put medicated salve on the bottom of their feet, and this is for the bumblefoot. So this is a process. You go through 20 birds. So, and we go through this twice a day. So as I said, it's a major process. So what we've done is we actually separated the birds off into two pens. All the birds go in one, and then as they're fed, they move off into the other pen, and that's how we make sure that we get everybody. We don't miss anybody. I just threw this slide in real quick as an inspiration to anybody who might think, man, I got the time and the money. I would love to do something like that. I wish I had some experience with penguins. I worked with this girl on my second day there, and unfortunately, I can't even tell you her name. She was there for 3 months. Her last day was the first day I was in a pen, so I literally only worked with her one day. But she had no animal keeping experience, no penguin experience. She just loved penguins, so she came and actually worked during her vacation. So I wanted to throw that in. I thought it was very inspiring, and just for anybody who's thinking out there, I would love to do this. It's actually possible if you're willing to learn the whole thing. They will train you if you're willing to spend the time there. So I talked about the nebulizer. Um, this is kind of what the process looks like. It's a little bit like a steam bath, but it's an ultrasonic nebulizer. It just takes a liquid and atomizes it, and it creates a mist. So we'll put the birds in this bin, and they stand in there, and they basically inhale the antibiotic. Now, while I was there, I realized real quickly that they only had one nebulizer, and there was quite often a waiting line at the nebulizer. People with birds in their boxes waiting to get in. And I asked about it, and they had all broke, and only one was working. So when I got back, I talked to our AZAC chapter, and they approved us purchasing 2 hospital-grade ultrasonic nebulizers. So I purchased them actually through a company in South Africa and had them delivered. They have different plugs over there, so it's not really something we could buy here and send there. They had to be purchased there. So our AZAC chapter funded those and had them delivered. Dwayne sent me this picture of them actually in use. I just wanted to thank everybody if you've supported our AZAC chapter. This is just one of the examples of where your money goes. So while I was there, I told you I was there in late December. I actually got to spend Christmas in South Africa. Actually worked on Christmas Day. So this was our luncheon on Christmas Day. This was essentially the entire staff that ran SANCCOB on Christmas Day. Most of the staff actually had off. So everyone you see in this picture, no one here was being paid. The 2 on the right, you see this is Leslie, Dwayne. They're actually, they live in South Africa, and they're longtime volunteers, and they're quite often. Everybody else you see are interns. Except for the 2 girls in the very left are actually penguin keepers from Shed Aquarium. They were there at the same time. We were overlapping. Everybody else is an intern, and almost all of these interns were from Germany. So during this, we had this luncheon on Christmas Day, and it's very interesting we talked a little bit about different customs in South Africa and in Germany. They really do not make a big deal about Christmas Eve like we do here. They have Christmas Day, and then they actually have Boxers Day, which is the day after, kind of like they do in Canada. So, but you'll notice, these interns from Germany, a lot of them are, they're pretty young, and they explain to me in Germany what, a lot of times what they do is between high school and college. They'll spend a year trying to figure out what they want to do. So a lot of these interns came and were actually here basically trying to figure out what exactly wanted. But they're really great. They're here typically on a 3-month assignment, and so they at some point get to work in every area of SANCCOB, vital to SANCCOB, the operations of SANCCOB volunteers and interns. So any of you that follow me on Facebook, I did a post on Christmas Day about this little guy. You'll notice he lost a foot. I just got attached to this guy. These are wild penguins, so they're actually not going to be friendly with us. And the truth is, we don't want them to be. The whole goal is to re-release them back into the wild, and so you don't want them friendly with humans. It's just not going to help them in their life in the wild. But this guy, despite being not friendly, was very tolerant of his treatment, and as you can see, he went through quite a bit. This was his med sheet. This is a admissions sheet. You can see he was an arrested molter. That means he was in the middle of a molt and for whatever reason never finished the molt, came in with a deep laceration, exposed bone. And so it was determined that after he was stabilized, the best course of action would just be to amputate his foot. And I can tell you he adapted very well to this. So I decided to adopt this guy, and we named him Speezy. We used the SPZ from Scenic Park Zoo and came up with the name of Speezy. So this was his adoption paper. You can see he was released December 23rd, a couple days before Christmas. And I posted the release video on Christmas Day. This is Speezy as last feed. I got to feed him for the last time while he was at SANCCOB, and he was being released the next morning. I also had the opportunity to go on the release, to see him released. And we also took 16 other penguins from my pen to be released, which is very rewarding. That is the whole goal of while you're there, is to get these guys back out into the ocean. So this was a morning, pack them up. They get a morning exam. They get fed, and then they get loaded into these boxes. We load them into the rescue vehicle and off to Stony Point. So this is the trip from SANCCOB down to Stony Point Nature Reserve, Betty's Bay. This is where they were picked up, so they're taken back to the same place that they were brought from. This is about an hour-and-a-half drive, and I can tell you the drive itself was worth the whole trip. You'll notice that last part of the drive is right along the ocean. It's just it's pretty amazing. I threw in a few pictures of the drive here, just so you can kind of see what you look like. You may notice also we're driving on the wrong side of the road, which was very disconcerting to me when I first got there. It takes a little getting used to. Beautiful drive. You're right. Mountains on the left and ocean on the right. Our driver told me that this is a really great place to see whales if you're coming for whale watching. Unfortunately, I was not there during the whale season. That would have been kind of interesting. So this is Stony Point. This is the ranger station. We unload there, and we actually had to carry them. It was a bit of a trip down to the ocean. They had a release point at the beach. So this is the video I posted on Christmas Day of the release. I shortened it up a little bit for this, just so it doesn't take too long. Hopefully you guys are seeing the video already. It's not too choppy. Now these are juveniles at this point, referred to as juveniles. They have never been in the ocean. Like I mentioned earlier, they were taken out of the nest as abandoned chicks. They were raised by SANCCOB, and so this is the first time they're actually even seeing the ocean. But as you can see, nature takes over, and they head right out. So this is Speezy on the beach right now. You'll notice him when he starts walking. It's pretty obvious. He walks on the little stump, but he actually does pretty good. And once he gets into the ocean, he's off, and you can't even tell. This is just this is another angle of the same release. I shot it with my phone. And as you're watching this, just take a look at how beautiful the area is. Just really awe-inspiring, the mountains around there. So he's trying to figure out what's going on. Hey, I've been here before. So this is Stony Point, Betty's Bay. If any of you ever get to South Africa, I would highly recommend heading down there and checking it out. It's a beautiful area, and the drive alone there is worth the trip. So one thing we wanted to do, I was there at the time, at this release, I was there with a vet tech from Georgia Aquarium, and also one of the keepers, penguin keepers from Shed Aquarium. So one thing we wanted to do was to try and follow along and see how long the group stayed together. And I was I was very happy to see that the group actually stuck together for a while. You'll notice there is in the middle of this group, one of the cormorants that actually has actually joined in on the group. So they headed out, and like I said, they actually stuck together for quite a while before separating. So we took a little tour while we were there of the Stony Point Nature Reserve. So as you can see, there's a boardwalk, keeps the people away from the birds. So you can actually get fairly close to them, but you can't actually touch them. The birds have the capability of actually walking underneath this boardwalk, so they can head on up the hill. They're actually, most of the nesting areas are up the hill because it's a little more sandy. They're not going to be nesting on the rocks, but this is really so exciting for me to see. I work with penguins every day, but you don't ever get to see them in the wild, and so to see thousands of penguins. I threw this in here because it was one of my favorite pictures. Just this one guy sunbathing on the rock by himself. So this is just a quick little video. Kind of gives you an one of the larger penguin colonies. There's also one at Boulders Beach, which unfortunately I didn't get to. Hopefully I'll get to next time I'm there. So I talked about earlier the guano collection. They're explaining that here in some signage and I'll show you why in the next slide here. Because of the guano collection, it changed the way they had to nest, and it's forced them out into the open and forced them to come up with new ways of nest. So AZA, as part of the AZA SAFE program, it stands for Saving Animals from Extinction. They came up with this project of Invest in the Nest. They tested out a number of different artificial nests to see what worked best, and this was the design they came up with. It's kind of a double layer, helps to protect them from the heat, and so people could invest in buying one of these nests or buying a number of these nests, and so they've got these placed now around. So this is, if you were part of the Invest in the Nest, this is where some of them ended up. So one thing I got to do while I was there was I got to give a talk to the interns and the staff, basically about the Seneca Park Zoo, about our colony, about how we manage our colony, the numbers. And in case you're wondering, as you're reading this, you're wondering why they are referring to me as an ape, why this is an ape talk. The program I was part of at SANCCOB was the Animal Professional Experience, and so that's what APE stands for. Now, one of my proudest moments while I was at SANCCOB was being assigned supervisor of a pen. I was only there for 2 weeks. When you first get there, there's a lot going on, and the learning curve is pretty steep. So I was very proud that within a week, I was able to move up to supervising a pen. I mean, it shows their trust in you, that you know that what you're doing. So I was very excited about that. So one more story about another bird. My second week, I kind of got attached to this little guy. He seemed to follow me around everywhere I came. This bird was there, and I took the number. It was always 631. Whenever I was in the pool, he would follow me around. This is a sound you hear continuously. They basically just want to be so So I ended up.
So this is Penny. Penny's getting released in the morning, and this is her last feeding.
Well, before I left, and named it Penny, and so kind of like the other one, I got to feed Penny for the last time while she was there. Unfortunately, her release date was on the same day I was leaving South Africa. So I did get to go to SANCCOB in the morning. I got to help box them up and put them in the truck and say goodbye. Unfortunately, I couldn't head off to Stony Point because I had a flight to catch later in the day, and it's about a 4-hour round trip there. So I didn't get to go see her release, but a couple of the volunteers, Dwayne and Leslie, went down to the release, and they filmed it, and they actually sent me some video of that release. So this is another 17 penguins being released from the pen that I worked in. And so during the time I was there, in 2 weeks, we released 34 penguins. So figure, and that's, I don't know if that's typical of a 2-week period, but you can see how many birds come through the program and how many birds get re-released. So these guys are going out. There was one adult with 16 juveniles. They tend to release an adult with the group. The adult would have been in the ocean already. Like I mentioned earlier, these juveniles have never been in the ocean program. Penny was in the second box over from the left. Second one coming out. So during this release, we got 2 volunteers from SANCCOB and 2 of the Stony Point. Again, just notice how beautiful the area is. So that was my last day at SANCCOB. 27-hour flight back, 2 hours in customs at JFK was a dream. And when I returned to the zoo, this was the board in our kitchen, which I thought was kind of humorous. So one thing I want to leave you guys with is, the question, how can you help? So there's a number of things you can do. Obviously, support our World Penguin Day today at the zoo. You can donate directly to SANCCOB, or you can adopt one of those chicks. You can actually adopt a chick, and they let you name it, and they'll send you information when it gets released. You can support Seneca Park Zoo through events like we're having today. Also, check out our AZAC chapter. We have some fundraising events, and we definitely support SANCCOB through that. And then also you want to check out Seafood Watch. I mentioned that one of the biggest issues that they have right now is their food supply due to overfishing pressures, and also climate change is just changing where the fish are. And Seafood Watch will help you make sure that you're making proper seafood decisions, so that whenever you're having seafood, you're having sustainably sourced seafood. And so I'll leave you with this slide. I took hundreds of pictures while I was there. A lot of them would fall into the category of tourist pictures. So I just want to say, I can't put them up here. Maybe I'll do a separate slideshow someday of my tourist pictures, but absolutely loved Cape Town. If anybody's ever looking for a place to visit. Once this is all over and we can travel again, definitely recommend Cape Town, South Africa. So that's it for my presentation. I don't know if anybody posted any questions.
Yeah, we do have a couple of questions. And you guys, if you have questions now, feel free to put those in the chat so we can answer them. We had one of our viewers ask, what kind of fish do they eat? So are they eating the same kind of fish at SANCCOB as our penguins do at the zoo?
No, so they're mostly going to be eating anchovies and sardines in South Africa, mostly anchovies. Unfortunately, those are very popular fish. And so unfortunately, right now, they're being way overfished in that area. And that's one of the things, just one of the things that SANCCOB is doing, is working with local governments to try and manage the fishing. At the zoo, we primarily feed a fish called capelin. If you guys get a chance, check out one of the videos on the zoo website. I posted a video of how to feed a penguin, and it goes through one of the feeds we did at the zoo. And it actually shows the fish that they're feeding. So we feed a capelin. It's a North Atlantic saltwater smelt. Because it's an Atlantic smelt, it's not a fish that's would be competing with the penguins themselves. It's a bait fish that reproduces really fast, and so it's a very sustainable fish, and so that's what we're going to use at the zoo. We also have a few birds that like trout. They're farm-raised trout and also silverside. So that's what we feed at the zoo.
Great. Next
Annie,
question is,
what are you seeing on your screen? You want me to unshare my screen?
I think that you're good, Kevin.
Okay.
I think we're just I think we're just seeing us for a question and answer now.
Okay, great.
Our next question is, can you keep penguins as pets, or should you keep penguins as pets?
No, you cannot keep penguins as pets. First of all, there's no way you could get one. These are an endangered species, and they're controlled by a species survival program, which is part of the AZA, we refer to it as SSP. And so they track all the genetics of all the different penguins in all the different zoos and aquariums. And so they know where every single penguin is and they report to them. They would coordinate, if we were going to send penguins from our zoo to another one, they would coordinate the move. They would be in the middle. And also they recommend breeding pairs based on genetics so that we're not crossbreeding any birds. So you could not get a penguin to keep as a pet. I would tell you, from working with them all day, you would need a huge freezer. You would not want to use your bathtub after they have. And you would need a really good carpet cleaner. You would probably not get a lot of guests at your house if you had a penguin as a pet.
Sounds like you need a pretty strong stomach for the smell of all the fish, both going in and coming out too. So
yeah, they're fish eaters, so they have a definite fishy smell. So
absolutely. We have somebody asking if you have many return patients to the clinic at SANCCOB. Do they get released and then oftentimes come back?
That's a good question. I didn't actually research that. I'm sure it happens from time to time. One thing I didn't mention is that they're also, before they're released, they're chipped like your dog or cat would be, so that if they do come back in, they can check them for their check the chip number, and then they can pull out their med records and they can see why they were there before and what took place. I don't know statistics of how many do return. I do know from Diane's talk about the Treasure oil spill that when they release them after cleaning them, they tag them with bands, and they did see some of them come back. During that time, they also tagged a few of them when they released them, when they drove them across the island and released them. They had satellite tagging on them to make sure they would actually return to their areas. And so that was really interesting too, that they actually did return to their area. So yeah, I'm sure some do return, hopefully not too many.
Great, and that kind of ties into our next question, that we have somebody asking if they are tagged after the release so they can see whether they return or not. So are all of them tagged when they go out?
They don't put wing tags on them anymore, but they are chipped. So if they come back, they can they can run a scanner over them, and it gives them a number, just like just like you would put in your dog or cat, so that a vet, when they picked your pet up, they could get information about it from the scan number. So they each have an embedded chip.
Perfect. That sounds like it's non-invasive, which I'm sure is much better than
Exactly.
having a tag like our penguins do.
Right. Yeah. And one of the reasons they don't want to tag them anymore is because when they molt, they put on a lot of weight. They increase their weight by about 30%. Because what's going to happen is they're going to drop all their feathers. They can't go out into the ocean to eat during that time. So they put on a lot of weight ahead of time, and they live off that. They live off that fat during the time, about the 2 weeks they're going through their molt. So while they put that weight on, their wings also get really fat. And so if you have bands on their wings, the bands get kind of tight. So they don't want to band their wings anymore. The chip is very. They don't even know they're getting it or have it. So.
Perfect. Now we do have bands on the wings of our penguins at our zoo. Kevin, what happens to those bands when our penguins go into molt?
Yeah, so if I mentioned the how to feed a penguin, I actually talk about that because I went through and kind of named off some of the penguins and identified them. And we're at the zoo right now. We're right at the beginning of our molting season, and so a lot of the penguins don't have bands. So typically what we'll do at the zoo is we'll just cut them off. The bands we use at the zoo are just colored zip ties, and then some of them have beads on them with a different pattern. So we just kind of learn the color patterns, and that's how we identify the bird. So when they start going into what we refer to as pre-molt, when they start eating a lot and they start putting that weight on, we know they're going to molt soon. We'll actually cut the bands off.
Great. And then our next question is, what happens to the penguins that do not get released at SANCCOB?
So I mentioned the home pen. They have a pen there that just houses not just penguins, all birds that are in there that are deemed unreleasable. There were some that were missing wings. If they lose a wing, say in a seal attack, while they can survive in the wild without a foot, it's very hard for them, probably almost impossible for them to survive without a wing, because because the way they swim, they actually fly in the water. They use their wings for propulsion. So if they only had one wing, they would have a hard time propelling themselves. Whereas missing a foot, they're fine in the water once they get to the water. The birds that are deemed unreleasable are kept in the home pen there. Unfortunately, like I mentioned earlier, that home pen's getting pretty full. And so that's why it's very important that they get as many birds as they can rehabilitated, because at some point, that pen is just going to be at capacity. They aren't going to be able to keep anymore, and they're going to have to make the terrible decision of, if they're not releasable, they may have to be euthanized. And so that's why it's important to get them back to the ocean.
Yeah, and that's definitely why it's important for us to take Kevin's advice on all those different ways that we can help right now too, because a lot of what's happening with the penguins right now and the causes that their populations are declining is in our hands. So there's a lot we can do to help hopefully stop those places from hitting capacity there too. Our next question says, where did all the penguins come from at the zoo, and will any of them be going to other zoos?
So as part of that species survival program, there is a lot of sharing penguins between facilities. At the SANCCOB, we currently have 30 penguins. We've hatched over the years, we've hatched 113. So obviously, if you do the math, we've sent a lot of penguins somewhere else. That SSP would kind of decide. Basically, what happens every year is we would let them know we have a certain number of penguins available, and other facilities might say we're looking for a couple females. This central organization would then coordinate that transfer. They would say, you're going to send these two to this zoo, and this one will go to that aquarium. And so currently we have 3 that are waiting to go out. We sent some to Edmonton recently, and we have some waiting to go out into Denver. They're actually building a brand new penguin exhibit, and we're just waiting for the exhibit to be done. So we typically like to keep it around 30, 32 birds at our facility, basically just because of nesting areas. We have had as many as 44, I think. So there are some that will be going out, and then we'll be doing some more breeding. We're actually getting a few penguins coming in. We'll be getting some new penguins from New England Aquarium. And that's, again, just for genetics. We have some males. We're going to get some females and match them up. And hopefully we'll have some new breeding pairs. And we can have a bunch more chicks at the zoo.
It's very exciting. And we have one more question here. It says, how long of a lifespan do they typically have in nature versus in a zoo?
In the wild, it's typically going to be anywhere from 10 to 15 years. But that's an average. And the average is thrown off, unfortunately, by the fact that a lot of times, that first year is really the hardest for an African penguin, surviving that first year. And so that kind of drives down that average. But they're typically going to live to be about 15. They do have some that they've tracked that have lived into their 20s in the wild. Now, in human care, we're going to see them live considerably longer because they're getting 24-hour vet care, and they don't have to deal with the dwindling fish supply. So we can see them live in human care well into their 30s. I actually worked with a penguin at another facility that is now, I believe, 42. So they can live quite a while in human care. Our oldest penguin is Liberace. He's 27. He'll be turning 28 later this year.
Yeah, that's really great. And, that's the case with a lot of our animals in zoos too. Most of the time they are going to live longer in human care just because, like Kevin said, they don't have the same threats and problems that they would out in nature. So very, very great to have our zoological facilities around to help these animals too. So guys, that is about all the time that we have, but thank you so much for tuning into our wonderful presentation today, and keep your eyes on our social media or head over to our website and you'll be able to see lots of different penguin activities we have today. Kevin had talked about how he has a keeper chat up there. He has a feeding video up there. We have some penguin crafts you can get involved with, or you can help us by donating to these conservation organizations as well. So Kevin, thank you so much for this amazing presentation. We really appreciate it.
Well, you're welcome. I'm glad. I was very excited. I actually enjoyed making it because it got to let me relive the whole experience through my pictures. So.
Absolutely. Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for tuning in for World Penguin Day today. And we would love to see you check out all the other resources we have for this day. And otherwise, enjoy the rest of your afternoon.